Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. This is Warisa Zainab, and you're watching Agahi. Often you must have heard this statement from people that they love you because you're always there for them, or they love you because you are somebody who will never say no to them, and you go that extra mile to make people happy. And it feels great to hear that. But there's a flip side. Sometimes in this process, when you find it difficult to say no to people, you end up feeling guilty by saying it, and you end up taking more than you can chew. And as a result, it leaves you feeling drained, stressed, and burned out. So today we're going to talk about people pleasing. And with us, we have amazing sister joining us from US, Rahimeh Ramazany. Assalamu alaikum, sister.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure to be with you today.
Absolutely honored to have you and really excited to talk about this. So, Rahimeh, you are a diversity, equity, inclusion, and intercultural specialist. First of all, tell us what that means.
What a wordful. Yeah, I know. So I love this intersection of these two fields. My master's is in intercultural communication, and there are like various different ways of saying intercultural communication. But basically, the idea is that different cultures, which is most people think of race, ethnicity, sometimes nationality, but they are different, they speak differently, and that is valid. Okay, cool. But also I would make the case like a culture is any in group where like if you're in that group, you kind of understand like without having to say it, who's in with you and who's not with you, right? So I would include gender, I would include religion. Like if we have, like we're both Muslim, if we have a non-Muslim guest come into our mosque, like just the way they move in the space, the way they talk, the way they're like interacting with people, like there's a sense that people are like, is this person new? Is this person like, are they Muslim? I'm not sure, right? Like without verbally saying it, and there's nothing wrong with that. Different cultures exist. In Islam, we see it as a beautiful thing to get to know other cultures. So it's not a matter of like, oh, we should all be the same gray blob. No, like the beauty and diversity of the human race is beautiful. Awesome. So getting the sense of different cultures communicate verbally, non-verbally in different ways, and appreciating those differences and like actually discussing how that plays out in interactions. A lot of times it can cause conflict or misunderstandings. And so just addressing that. Awesome. Right. So that's intercultural communication. And then diversity, equity, and inclusion. I have been playing around with like how to summarize DEI if you're not already familiar with it. And I've kind of landed for now on it's kind of like social justice for companies, especially in Muslim spaces. Islam is a religion that is very social justice oriented. There are a lot of Muslims who are practicing Muslims who are in social justice spaces on different topics. And so it's kind of like you're taking that like justice perspective and putting it into companies and organizations, which is amazing because they create our products. That's where we go for work in Muslim spaces, non-Muslim spaces, and so on. And so just the idea that, again, people are different and recognizing those differences, what different needs do people have, like especially around equity, people need different things to be supported. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually a beautiful thing. And there's different strengths that people have. And how would you make sure that people are included? And there are a diversity of people present in any organization for, business cases, of course, but also just like it's the right thing to do.
So what is it like being in your position? I mean, the kind of work that you do on a daily basis. If you could share some examples just so that we can get an idea.
Yeah, so I really believe, I get questions a lot online about like, hey, I really want to work in DEI. How do I do that? And most of the time I get the sense that people mean I want to work in consulting, DI consulting. I want to work in DI facilitating or training. And if you want to do those things, that is super, super cool. That I work in a DEI consulting firm as my day job, and it is wonderful, worthy, amazing work. It is very difficult, which I'll come back to. But my personal belief is that DEI is more of a lens through which you can do any work, and we should do all work, right? So if you are a product manager, if you are in marketing, if you are in hiring for any position, if you are a stay-at-home parent with one toddler, and that is the person, like the toddler is a person, influencing this child about the world. Like, how are you teaching them about race? Are you showing them children's books where people with different skin tones are represented in positive ways? I just saw a post from someone. So I'm in California, so United States, California, that's my context. But I saw someone on my connections on LinkedIn who's based in the UK who shared a children's book where a non-Muslim child was in like an Arab market and talking about like, oh, the people here look so scary, right? And just the idea that, okay, this child, this 2-year-old reading this book, their very first, if they're not in a Muslim Arab household themselves, they don't have Arab children or Muslim children as friends in their preschool or whatever their neighbors that they play with, their very first introduction to Muslims, to Arabs, or any other group is that, oh, these are scary people because they look different, right? Like that leaves an impression and drip, drip, drip over time. So it's not a matter of like, oh, I have to be a consultant, I have to be a facilitator or trainer, I have to be a public speaker. Like that's what people think of. And you can do those things. Like those are amazing, I think, like fun things to do. Yeah. But you can take this DEI lens of diversity, looking at diverse human experiences and seeing that as beautiful and worthy of attention and representation. Inclusion, are people of these differences feeling like they can contribute and have their voice heard and actually matter in decision making and stuff like that, and not just like exoticism or like, oh look, you're so like special and exotic and like amazing. I'm like, no, that's not, no, that's problematic. And then again, with equity being that people are different and need different things in order to be effective at, their jobs or in life and so on. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. That again is a part of the beautiful tapestry of human experience. And it does take work. It absolutely does take work, and it's worthy to do. Like the point of life is not to like do as little work as possible.
We'll be talking about people-pleasing behavior, and I know that talking about equality or equity or inclusion, how common is it for people to feel left out, and just for the sake of fitting in or to be a part of that narrative, they try to mimic others or copy others or do things that will make others happy just so that they can feel, a part of the group or circle.
Yeah, so people pleasing is a huge part of mental health, and I see it as a survival mechanism that and a trauma response that I, growing up or as an adult, I've had years of experience where I have seen that if I'm not liked by, if you're a child, like by my caretakers, parents, teachers, children, right? All of these things, felt like when I'm a child, other children, if I'm not liked by these people, then my life is going to have serious detriments. Like I'm going to be in danger or emotionally in danger, physically in danger. My needs are not going to be met, whatever my needs are. Again, needs are more than just like food and shelter, also like love and care and support and all of those things. Okay. So in order to have my needs met, especially as a child, right? Like I'm going to do anything that I need to do to make sure that the people around me like me and I get my need met. Okay. So people who are people pleasers, I am a recovering people pleaser. They are going to contort themselves and their own personalities and their own likes and dislikes into like whatever situation or people that they're around and go with whatever other people want. So as you mentioned, right, like if you're asked as a child, as a teenager, as an adult at work or in your family life, hey, can you do this? Hey, I need you to do this or whatever. It's like you are the yes person. You are the person who's like, yes, I will do that. Yes, I want to do that. Or you're like hyper vigilant and you haven't even been asked yet, but you're like offering to do those things. So for me, for instance, I've had this problem my whole life and it's really embarrassing. Like it's truly embarrassing where someone will ask me to do something, a project or something. And sometimes it's like I actually am interested, but I clearly have too much on my plate. And
Yeah.
yet I have so like rushed into saying yes and hadn't taken a moment to be like, what other things do I have on my plate? Am I going to be able to do those things well if I take this on? And then like the high of the moment passes and then I realize like, oh my gosh, I am so overwhelmed. And then I have to say no. Alternatively, another thing that can happen is like resentment, is that I expect the other person to know that I don't want to do this, even though I haven't said anything. So like, again, like having compassion for people who are people pleasers or recovering people pleasers, because again, it's like a trauma response. Like I have gone through a seriously difficult time. Me, like people who are recovering people pleasers have gone through such a difficult time. Like it's harmful to us to be this way. So like just having that compassionate perspective, not like, oh, you are a bad person because you're not actually who you say you are. Like that's not helpful. And having that, oh my gosh. Oh, sorry,
I
I
was,
have ADHD,
actually,
so my brain goes whoop. What's that?
I was actually, interested in hearing about, like you said, you're recovering from it.
Yes.
First of all, how early did it start? And when did you realize that this is what's going on?
I don't, it's probably since a very young age as a child. I don't really remember exactly how young. I do know I realized it in my late 20s.
Okay.
Like I think it also is a matter of like that people pleasing hasn't been like a well-known phenomenon. Like a lot of mental health stuff is really picking up speed as time goes on, and also as it becomes less of a taboo topic, which is why I love talking about mental health, even not on like platforms like this, but also just slipping it into everyday conversation. I just mentioned like, oh yeah, in therapy, this is what I talked about today with like friends at work, like just to normalize it. Like that is the day-to-day work of just slipping it into normal conversation because it is normal. I personally believe we should all be in therapy. You should be in therapy. I should be in therapy. I'm like telling my parents, like, you guys should go to therapy. Like everyone, we should all go to therapy.
Going to your general physician is considered normal. You have your regular checkups to make sure everything is functioning properly. You have your regular blood tests done just to ensure that there is no imbalance or what you call a deficiency of any sort. So why can't we normalize going to a therapist or a counselor or a psychologist or even a psychiatrist? In fact, what makes me worry and concerned is when somebody says that, say for a 50, 60 or 40-year-old tells me, I've never been to a mental health professional. That I find a bit concerning.
Yeah, definitely. And so I will say, like learning, about people pleasing, a lot of it was just there's so much information out there for free. People who are mental health professionals putting content online for people to find. And I personally like I'm a millennial, Gen Z as well. Like we're all on social media anyway. There's a lot of older generations as well who like spend a lot of time on social media. So if you follow people who are mental health professionals, like, and make sure that they're like legit as much as possible. Always take things you read online with a grain of salt for sure. Have your critical thinking. Like don't just follow anything that anyone can like start an Instagram page and just post whatever they want. Like, so just keep that in mind. But like you're already on social media, so you're like drip over a long period of time. It's not like you have to go spend thousands of dollars on a seminar to like fix yourself, and then like in a matter of 2 intensive 2 days you've like cured yourself of people pleasing or whatever. Like, so you're able to still go to work and function and go with your family and like introduce one little new topic at a time, sit with it, think about it, kind of like maybe interact with it in your life, see how that feels, come back, learn more, and just rinse and repeat. But yeah, like, so having said that, as a millennial and, you know, the next generation, Gen Z, I do think that we have a lot of privilege in that we have this understanding of how to get information off of the internet and the critical thinking, hopefully, to like distinguish like, okay, this is a little bit more legit. Okay, this doesn't look super cool. Like I'm going to let that go and not follow this person. Whereas our elders, the internet was not around for a lot. Like they literally did not, the whole internet did not exist. The whole idea of social media did not exist very long ago. Like having the idea of going to therapy, like not even that it was a taboo, that just did not exist. And especially for immigrants, sorry, what?
It wasn't common at all.
Yeah. And especially for the immigrant experience, like talk about survival mode, like you are just being bombarded by like, honestly, like white supremacy talking about like, I want you to like leave your culture. If you're Muslim, like you should not be Muslim anymore. We're going to punish you in every conceivable way, like it directly or indirectly for being Muslim. And yeah, so having compassion for other people, like, and that's such a core part of Islam.
Yes.
Having compassion for yourself and what you're like, okay, if I am a recovering people pleaser, it's not that I am doing this and not showing people my actual personality because I'm like a mean, horrible, manipulative person. It's like, oh, I've gone through some really hard things. And this is how I learned to survive those things, especially again, as a child. Like children should not be judged at all for what they did to just survive. But at the same time, like looking at, if you like, again, I identify as a millennial, if you're a Gen Z or younger generation, like looking at our elders with compassion as well as like, what did they go through that we don't have to go through because they walked that path for us, right? So it's not to give people an out that like you can just do anything you want because you went through a hard time. That is not what we're saying. But just like layering the accountability and like, hey, let's learn to move from survival mode to thriving and actually being our true selves, because we are in a safe place now to do that. Let's layer that with compassion, that people aren't doing it because they're just like a malicious, evil, mean person at heart. Like, no, most people are not like that.
You know what you mentioned just now about the previous generation or the elderly who didn't have access to internet and technology like we do today, and also the fact that mental health specialist or mental health support was not common, it wasn't accessible, and most people didn't even know it exists. So they mostly survived. They didn't try to survive, they were on survival mode. But this generation is blessed in the sense that it has access to a lot of information. It is mostly available for free. There are so many self-help books, some amazing ones that actually help you, you know, with so many things that you may be struggling with. But I think the most important step is to actually figure out what's going on. People may be doing it all their life without even realizing that I am a people pleaser or I'm somebody who finds it difficult to set boundaries. But just say no, for whatever reasons that is. So I want to ask you, I mean, surely something must have happened that would have been like a wake-up call that, okay, you know what, I need to stop doing this. I need to start saying no to people. I have to start communicating that, you know, I've got enough on my plate. I cannot afford to take it.
If you find yourself, as I found myself, like, and this takes a lot of self-awareness. So you have to work on self-awareness before you're going to realize these things. It's a progress. So really try and pay attention to your thought process, like your automatic thoughts, especially. If someone asks you to do something and your pattern is pretty much always, if not always, to say yes, and then you have this sense inside of like, being unhappy, being resentful of being asked, or now like dragging yourself through the task that you've now committed yourself to do, or like wishing or like criticizing the other person in your mind, like, why don't they know that I don't want to do this? Why would they even ask? Like those sorts of things. Like that's a pretty good indication that you have some people pleasing tendencies, because one, again, like the perception that you've given other people, again, with compassion, like you're not a malicious evil, I'm not a malicious evil person for doing this, it's a survival instinct, but you've given people this perception of who you are that is not actually who you are, but people are going to interact with you like the way you show up, right?
Yes.
So if you say yes to all, like everything you're asked, people are like, okay, this person accepts when you say yes, and I need something done, and so I'm going to ask them, right? And they're like, I asked you, you could have said no, but you didn't. So people can't read your mind.
Yeah, of course.
And so that feeling of like being unhappy or having like negative feelings towards being asked, or that you were asked and now that you have to do this thing, that is a really good indication that you have people pleasing tendencies. And so just coming to the sense of like, okay, other people can't read my mind. If I don't actually express myself, how are they going to know? But then like you have to deal with the fact that with people pleasers, we're so scared of the other person not liking us, because that's like the end of the world if other people like us. So you also have to work on not just like, oh, I'm not saying like, oh, just say no to things and that's it. That's all it. No. Like you have to break down slowly in a process. Again, it's really great to do this with a therapist. But you know, you can do it on your own if you want to, and if you like have the self-discipline and drive for it, to work your way through like, okay, what would happen if this other person got angry or disappointed with me? Like what would happen? Would it be the end of the world? Would they end my relationship with them because I don't do this thing? Like what kind of relationship do we have if the only thing that's keeping it afloat is me doing literally everything that they want me to do?
That's
Is
a
that like an actually valuable relationship?
yeah. I think that these are some key questions that you need to ask yourself, because there's this element of rejection, there's this element of abandonment, there's this element of fear, feeling threatened, and it's all up here. Sometimes the threat is not even real, but
Yeah.
you get so worked up in your mind, and you come up with all these, what if something terrible happens? What if I get sacked from work? What if this person starts hating?
Yeah.
All the what ifs are negative. So I think what will help is if you shift the what ifs to the positive side. What if this person appreciates that I'm being honest?
Yeah.
What if this person actually will make things easier for me in the future so I can handle everything on time, for example. So, and that's difficult.
It's
And that's
super
a
hard.
difficult thing to do, especially if you've done it all your life, or if this is how you've been brought up, that you must do as you're told. You cannot say no to the caregivers or teachers, or
Yeah.
some people, they can't hear the word no, they can't. And it's like my way or the highway, then people kind of grow up as an adult believing that I have no right to voice my opinion. I have no right to say no. I must do as I'm told, or this is the only way I'll actually make myself appreciated or valued.
Yeah, the cultural aspect in the sense of like ethnicity, there are ethnicities, many of which are predominantly Muslim, where saying no to an elder, whether they're a parent or your grandparent or an auntie or uncle or
Neighbor.
neighbor, anyone who's elder to you,
Yeah.
there is no socially acceptable way to say no. Like there literally isn't. So that is another thing that I think younger generations who are coming up in cultures that are not their parents' ethnic culture, or like a hybrid, like going to school with non-Muslims or people from the West. I want to be clear, I don't want to make any culture like a villain. Like, we're not here to say this culture is bad, that culture is bad, this one is better, this one is better. No. They have constructive, positive ways of being, and every culture has not so constructive ways. Like, we can have a whole other section. I don't want this to be misconstrued as like, oh, Rahimeh is all for like the West and, you know, the UK or American culture that's not Muslim, and like that's what Rahimeh is saying. Okay, so please, that's not what I'm saying. In the aspect of people pleasing, I do believe having boundary setting is something that we can learn from Western cultures. And appreciate, again, the diversity of the human experience, that everything is under Allah's creation, right? So like, there's nowhere I'm going that like Allah's creation is not there, right? Just because people don't call themselves Muslims. Okay, cool. Having said that, so if you are in a ethnic culture where there is no socially acceptable way of saying no, you have a harder time of it. And honestly, it's a slower uphill battle. I don't think it's impossible, depending on your situation, though. Like, there are some elders, like, they literally cannot see it another way. And again, like, that's where I feel like compassion and mercy, like the values of our religion, come in, where everyone is a product of their upbringing. And if this is how our elders were brought up, like, there's a reason for that. It's not just because they're a truly malicious, evil person that just wants to give you a hard time. And hopefully that can help like soothe the hardship of what you're going through, and knowing ultimately like that Allah is with you, and the struggle of being a good person and having patience and showing grace to people who are not necessarily being super kind to you, like, that is meaningful and worthy. A meaningful and worthy struggle, right? So just like tying that all in. Sorry, I'm going a little bit more into the religion side of things. But on the other hand, like, if you are learning about it, like slipping it into conversations where you're talking to your elders, when it's not like you confronting them, like, hey, I learned this thing, isn't that cool? And they're like, oh, that's interesting, because they're not feeling like you're confronting them about their behavior. Like, people don't like being confronted about their behavior. You can talk about, this is something you're learning, that you can talk about, hey, I had this conversation with my friend and this is how we broke down our disagreement. Isn't that interesting? What do you think? And like, they can respond. And just like having the patience, it's going to take a while.
Yes. I'm really glad, Rahimeh, that you mentioned the Islamic perspective of this, because this just reminds me, when you said setting boundaries and how important that is, we have certain guidelines within our faith, that there are certain things that are not permissible, certain things that are forbidden, and certain things that are makruh. So it's not really like forbidden, but it's better not to have or consume. That's kind of setting a boundary of faith.
Yeah.
People and certain things to come into your life or become a part of your existence. Say, for example, living in the West, and I'm sure you come across this as well. It's like a friend who offered you something, a snack, and you know it's not halal, but you're going to say no. Despite the fact that you don't want to offend this person, you don't want to come across as rude or ungrateful, but you have a higher objective, a higher goal, and that is submission to Allah and obedience. And that comes first. So that automatically allows you to set certain boundaries and say no to things and people or places. If we could keep that perspective and apply that, implement that in our daily life, then I think this could help a lot of people in starting to say no or refuse, or just be open why they're unable to accept the offer. It doesn't have to come across as rude, like no, it could mean like just a brief explanation, like this is I'll give you an example. This is like ages, decades ago. I went for a job interview, yeah.
Mm,
And you know how it is. You walk into the
yeah.
office, and the interview panel, they'll greet you and they'll extend
Mm.
their hand to shake your hand.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah. And if you just stand there and say, no, I am not going to shake your hand, I refuse. Of course,
Yeah.
he's going to do that. Not because they are scared that they won't get the job, because sustenance is a promise made by Allah. But if you could say it politely in a nice way, like,
Mm,
apologies, but my faith doesn't allow physical contact with opposite,
mm,
or
mm,
what have you, people do respect where you're coming from. People do respect
mm,
sometimes that, your faith means a lot to you, or
mm.
whatever. I mean, there are all sorts, like some make it.
Yeah. No, I think that's an excellent example. I also don't have physical contact with men. And so I've had to have that, like in the before times before COVID, like that happened all the time. And I had to have like a whole script on like the song and dance of like trying to be nice, trying to like, I know that you don't like know this. I know there are a lot of Muslims who don't practice this way. So like it can be very confusing that you're interacting even with like another woman who wears hijab, who is hugging men, who's like shaking
Yeah.
hands, like all of these things. And it's not a judgment thing, it's just, but it is different. And as a non-Muslim, like I'm so confused, like why it's so
Yes.
different. And like to never have someone be like, I'm not going to shake your hand, like generally in a non-Muslim setting, like that would be incredibly insulting. Like you're straight up in like, especially in a job interview,
Yes.
right? So
Yes.
like understanding the other person, again, having that compassion and trying to understand the other person's situation. So what I love is like, this is a boundary and it's not up for debate, but I can say it in a way that helps you understand. I would say just like about boundary setting, like you don't, depending on the relationship, depending on how the other person reacts, like if they're being rude to you setting a boundary, because a lot of the times like when you start setting boundaries, the people who have benefited the most from you not
Mhm.
having boundaries are the ones who are like the
Yeah.
most angry at you. So just
Yeah.
because they're angry does not necessarily mean that you have done anything wrong. I'm going to say that again. If you are a recovering people pleaser, just because someone is angry at you, that does not mean that automatically you have done something wrong. It just means that they're upset that they didn't get what they wanted. Okay, so sit with that, like write that down, think about it, like what someone's angry at me and I didn't like, I don't have to do anything about it to make it anyway. So there's that. But if that's exactly the point, like if you do the song and dance, I do the same thing. I put my hand on my heart. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. Like I'm so happy to meet you, but I don't shake hands with men. And then like I have a whole like thing that I do. So and then go on with the conversation. But if they give me a hard time, the boundary is still there. I'm not gonna be like, oh, you're upset, so therefore I'm just gonna do it. Like, no. Like you're upset, but this is my boundary. And boundary setting is not about like a wall. I've heard it described as like, I don't know, like a fence with like holes
Yeah.
in it where people can walk through. You're setting a boundary where
Yeah.
you can interact with me in this way. This is how I expect to be interacted with respect, with compassion, and so on. And if you interact with me that way, then I'm happy to engage with you. The handshaking thing is a perfect example. I'm happy to have a conversation with you. I'm happy to do this interview. I'm happy to hang out or do whatever the thing is. But like, I don't want you to touch me. And I get to decide, it's my body. I get to decide
Exactly.
that I don't want you to touch me. And
Good
if
point.
you have a problem with that, then that tells me that you
A lot
don't
about
respect my boundaries. And okay, like I'm going to go find other people who do respect my boundaries. And I wish you well. Like you don't have to like hate the person. I could be like, I wish you well. I wish you healing. But just like, we're clearly not a match.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
And I think that serves a greater benefit without you even realizing. Because if this person or even organization, company, what have you, is not respecting your boundaries, like you said, or
Mm,
is not considering the fact that it's making you uncomfortable,
mm,
do you really want to spend your life, your precious
yeah,
life,
yeah, yeah,
this person
yeah.
or organization or company?
Mm, mm.
Now, these are, again, key questions to ask.
Yeah.
You
And
do
different
have
people are going to come up with different answers, and that is okay. Yeah.
And yes, I totally agree. Like
Mm.
you said, there are some people out there who take advantage of the fact that you're someone who can be easily manipulated
Mhm.
into breaking those boundaries that you are trying to establish. And that's what they do. That's what their ultimate goal in life is, just to manipulate people and take advantage of the fact that they find it difficult to say no to you.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah,
This is heavy stuff.
I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know, it's so, this is why we really have to sometimes just sit with
Mm.
ourselves in
Mm.
solitude. And I say this all the time. Spend time with yourself
Mm.
and just think,
Mm.
reflect,
Mm.
observe.
Mm.
You
Mm. Mm.
know, if you're feeling extremely stressed out, burned out, overwhelmed, drained,
Yeah.
anxious, waking up with headaches every morning, achy, tired muscles, and like you
Yeah.
really need to ask yourself before you pop that painkiller in your mouth, what's causing it?
Mm. Mm. Mm.
If
Yeah.
you have more than you can handle, um, can you cut down on tasks? Are you getting enough rest? Are
Mm.
you looking after yourself?
Yeah.
Uh, you can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Mm. Mm. And bringing in Islam, like Islam is our lives, right? I feel like a lot of times when we talk about these concepts that are kind of coming about in non-Muslim spaces, that there are some Muslims who kind of like reject or won't even consider learning about them because they're from non-Muslim sources. I personally believe like learn about things, and then if it applies and matches with Islamic values, then great. Like just because the words are not in Arabic doesn't mean that they're not like in line with Islamic values. So
Yeah,
that's my personal belief. I know there are other opinions out there, and I respect that.
yeah.
So for me, like bringing in Islam, like how many times in the Quran does it talk about like for those who ponder, for those who think, for those who
Oh, yeah.
sit and reflect? And of course, like we're talking, like in those cases, my understanding is like about the Quran and like the teachings of the Prophet and so on, peace be upon him. But also just in general, like our religion is one that encourages thinking, that encourages reflection, right?
Exactly.
So this is just more of the same. This is more things to sit on your own in the quiet of whatever space that you feel comfortable and you can do your best thinking, or that you have access to in the moment, right? If you don't have like the best situation, not everyone has the privilege of having the like the most in like introspective spaces in their life. um like sit and ponder the things that you're learning in all different aspects of your life. How is this reminding me of Allah? How is this reminding me of my Islamic values, reminding me of my responsibility? Also, again, like our bodies, our minds, like they are an amana from Allah as well. And just as we are going to be held accountable for how we treated other people and the things that we were given in this life, we were also given our own bodies. Like, did we take care of those as well? So it's not selfish or wrong or not Islamic to take care of yourself. It like you need to take care of yourself as well. Like that is
Yes,
part of
of
Islam as
course,
well.
of course. And you know what you said just now, I think this will also help with the guilt
Mm,
associated with saying no to
mm,
something or someone
mm,
that you're passionate about. Say, for example, it's a cause. Yeah. Say, for
mm,
example, it's about volunteering in the soup kitchen to feed the homeless people.
mm,
And you have
mm,
asked you
mm.
to come and support for a couple of hours, and you know you've got a presentation to work on and you have a deadline to meet, but you really, really want to go ahead and
Yeah.
volunteer and do whatever it's required. And then there's this guilt associated with saying no because you know it's a good cause or something you really want to be a part of, but maybe time, circumstances, or your health is not allowing you.
Mm, mm. Yeah.
So, yeah,
I like to, so two things. So one, some people with people pleasing tendencies, myself very much so, we have a habit of immediately just jumping into, yes, I will do that. Yes, that's awesome. Even if it's like something we actually like to do, right? Like you genuinely want to do that. Okay. Sometimes it's like, I don't want to do that. And I say yes anyway. Sometimes it's, I actually do want to do that, but I didn't keep track of like all the things that I have going on. And am I even able to handle another task? So as much as possible, like start practicing, and with practice over time, you will get better at it. It's not going to be a light switch that you just turn on and then boom, you're amazing at it. Is pausing when someone asks you, or an opportunity comes your way, or someone asks you a question to do something or something, and just being like, okay, I'm going to take 5 minutes or however long, right? Like if it's a really serious matter, that you take some weight, like you can take a day, you can take a couple of days, take the weekend, whatever. You decide how much time is appropriate, but like at least 5 minutes to just sit, make sure your heart rate is steady and like calm, and reflect. Do I actually want to do this? Okay. If the answer is yes, if the answer is no, like, okay, you have your answer. If the answer is yes, or like, I'm inclined towards it, like, do I have the capacity? I really like terming in the, putting it in terms of capacity. Everyone, no matter who you are, whether you have a lot of capacity or less for, if you're sick, you have an autoimmune disease, you have chronic pain, whatever the case may be, that doesn't make you a bad person. It just is. Everyone has a certain amount of capacity in the day. You can only get so much done. So you get to decide what you get done, but you can't just like cram in more things. Like you're out, like you've run out of attention span, you've run out of decision-making power, all of that. Okay. So if you are already full and you add another thing, that means that either one, you're not going to finish like the things that you're doing, the quality of what you're doing is going to go down. Or in my case, on top of those other things, I also say yes, and then I have to like send a message later, be like, I'm sorry, I have to back out, like over and over and over and over again. And then like you get a reputation, and like people are like, they're like not able to keep their promises. And that's not a great thing. I don't want to be that person either. It's not a great thing. So just take a moment, be calm, think, do I want to do this? If I do want to do this, do I have the capacity to do it? If I don't have the capacity, is there something I could switch out and do another time? If there isn't, just be like, it's not, your response can be something to the effect of like, it's not about that what you're offering me to do or participate in isn't completely worthy, wonderful work. I support it. I just simply don't have the capacity at this time. I'm already full up. And I wouldn't suggest like giving super detailed reasons of like, oh, I have these other things going on, because a lot of the time well-meaning people as well will like debate you because they need help with something or they want you to do it, and they don't see it necessarily as like bothering you or giving you a hard time, but that is the case. So it's better if you're on the other end of that to not like debate people. Like they'll be like, oh, well, that's not really important. Like, okay, now I have to feel like I have to explain why it is important. Like just like the whole, like that's not, you don't need to feel like you need to justify like your life and your decisions to other people, especially depending on whatever relationship you have and if you're not that close to them. So just being like, I'm sorry, I have other responsibilities that are really serious today. I just simply don't have the capacity, and just leave it at that. And then you get to see how that person responds. And if that person respects your boundaries, then you're like, oh, this is someone I think I want to keep in my life because they respect me and my boundaries. If the other person responds with anger or guilting you or like you're a horrible person or something like that, like, oh, that is going to be a red flag for you to be like, maybe I don't need to keep this person like as close in my life. Again, it depends on your relationship with that person. If it's just like a friend or a community member that you don't need to spend a lot of time with, just like set those boundaries to protect yourself. Like I expressed myself, I considered it, I told them like I simply don't have the capacity, and if they're giving me a hard time anyway,
It's like this is what you're saying. It reminds me of a quote that I can't tell you the secret or the key to success, but I can tell you the key to failure, and that is not being able to say no or people pleasing.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, and like you said, it affects your body, it affects your mind, your mental health, your well-being. Maybe you wouldn't recognize it at the time, but few years down the line, you will look back and you'll be like, I could have done things differently. I could have handled situation and people differently, and that would have allowed me more time to actually do things that I really wanted
Mm,
to do.
mm,
Because you know how common is this, Rahime? And I would appreciate if you could give some examples from your
mm,
own life that you really wanted to do something for yourself. Maybe go out and hang out with friends or just relax, just, but you made compromises or
mm,
sacrifices just because you wanted to give preference to someone else over your own well-being.
mm.
And you missed out on things as a result.
Yeah, kind of like almost like FOMO, like fear of missing out. Also, that you sign up for too many things. So especially in like after COVID, since COVID, like all of us are in, honestly, like all of us are burnt out. So if
Yeah.
you aren't taking care of yourself, like you physically are going to feel it if you're not already feeling it. And also like Islamically, again, like we're supposed to split up our day so you have a section for work, a section for rest, a section for family, like holistically taking care of yourself, taking care of your body and your health, exercise, all of these things. Okay. So the idea of rest and rejuvenation is something that your body needs, and there's nothing wrong with setting boundaries for that. Something that I love that I've personally been doing is, again, like not even justifying it to other people. Like if someone asks me, hey, do you want to do this thing? And I take a moment, I pause, I think, do I actually want to do this thing? And sometimes I do realize I'm like, yeah, I could actually move some stuff around and it would be worth it because I really enjoy this person and I want to spend time with them. Great. But now I feel like good that I made that decision rather than rushing it, even though it ends with the same thing of me hanging out with this person. But the fact that I checked in with my own needs and my own wants and centered that and did like some deliberation made me feel better about the time spending time with them versus like just rushing into it and not thinking about it. Is if you say no to someone or like an offer to participate in something, whether it's like philanthropy oriented or just like work related or whatever, work is different. Like if they're like paying you for
Yeah.
certain
It's
hours of the day,
hardcore.
like you can't be
Yeah.
like, no, I'm tired, I don't want to. Like, okay, you're on the clock still. So that's like a slightly different thing. But in your personal life, right, like you gave the great example of like volunteering for something. It's a completely worthy, amazing thing to do. So it's not a matter of like, do you support the cause or anything like that? But I have been working all day. If you have children, like raising your children is absolutely worthy, important. Like that is the most important thing that you could possibly be doing, right? Islamically or otherwise, right? So it's not like, oh, just raising children is like, no. There's no just in raising children. Like mothers and fathers, especially mothers, like we should just like lift them up so high. Don't give them any bit of a hard time. Like give them a cookie, give them a hug, like babysit their children for them so that they can go take a nap. Like don't give mothers a hard time ever. So that's a whole other thing. And just to be clear, I am not a mother, right? So this is like, it's not me saying it for my sake. It's like seeing my friends who are mothers. But whatever it is that you're doing, I need to take a nap. I want to like sit on my phone and just scroll. And that's like a version of me decompressing from my day. It's not like, oh, it's a waste of time. Like keep it halal, right? We're not talking about like just watch anything on your phone. No. Like keep it halal for sure. Be it like, where are you giving your attention? Because it absolutely is feeding stuff in your brain and, like what kind of language are you, absorbing and stuff like that. But scrolling on your phone can be a great way. And that's how I decompress after a hard day. Absolutely. So that is a valid way of spending your time. And you don't have to be quote unquote productive. Oh, you're off work. Okay, go volunteer at this thing. Okay, go take care of your kids and take them to soccer practice or football for you UK people. Honestly, I think football makes way more sense than soccer, but whatever. I just touched on stuff. We'll come back and talk about that later.
Yeah, I would rather just take a walk in nature or something.
Yeah, whatever. Like taking a walk in nature That is amazing, valid way of spending your time. And you don't have to be on constantly giving to other people. Like you need to take care of yourself as well. And that is valid and reasonable. And if someone is giving you a hard time, again, it's not that you are the one that's wrong. It is a red flag for you to see, okay, this person is giving me a hard time for like taking care of my body's needs so that I'm a healthy, holistically healthy person. Islamically, Allah has told us to do all of these things in a holistic, healthy way.
And
Why are you giving me a hard time about this?
yeah, and also people need to be reminded that you are not selfish for doing that, for looking after yourself, for practicing self-care, or for taking time out for your own existence.
Yeah,
There's
your own
nothing
existence.
selfish, there is nothing selfish about it.
Yeah.
Like, no, I mean, you are not required to burn yourself or to set yourself on fire to warm other people.
Yes. And you shouldn't. You should not do that. Anyone who's expecting you and pushing you to do that, that is something that you need to look at that person and be like, is this person a safe, healthy influence in my life? And if you have the opportunity, if you have that sort of relationship, right, like enjoining good, forbidding evil, like encouraging them to think about like, hey, are you treating yourself that way? Are you burning yourself on both ends of the stick?
Yeah.
Because you think that that's healthy, but they're also suffering. So you like, if you have the capacity, if you have that relationship in a moment where you feel like they might be receptive to that, like also encouraging them because they're probably treating themselves that way too.
Thank you so much, Rahimeh. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, but this is not the end. This is just the beginning of our conversation, and inshallah, we will have more conversations around these topics in the future. But I just want to say one thing before I end this program to all our lovely viewers who are watching this program, that if you live for other people's acceptance, you will die from the rejection. Let that sink in. So, once again, Rahimeh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, because I know there's this time difference, and it's you know, it's a Saturday, and you know, but thank you so much. Jazakumullah khairan.
Alhamdulillah, it is the best use of time to encourage people who are people pleasers, recovering people pleasers, not even aware of it, to love on themselves, show themselves self-compassion. That is the best use of any time, and I'm so grateful to be here with you all.
Jazakumullah khairan. And inshallah, we'll see you again next Saturday at 12 p.m. only on Hidayat TV. Till then, look after yourself mentally, spiritually, and psychologically. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.